She thought it was just a normal day at the market until one officer crossed the line and one man showed what true strength really means. Watch till the end, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. The morning sun rose over Riverville, spilling golden light across the town like honey. The air was warm already, carrying the mingled scents of fresh bread, ripe tomatoes, and delicate blossoms from the flower stalls lining the busy farmer's market. Birds chirped in the trees, and the low hum of voices blended with laughter, rustling bags, and the occasional bark of a dog. Gina Johnson moved slowly along the rows of stalls, one hand lightly resting on the gentle curve of her belly beneath a flowing light blue dress. She was 5 months pregnant and moving with the careful grace of someone very aware of the life growing inside her. In her other hand, she carried a wicker basket already half full with produce, crisp lettuce, sun-bright peaches, and a handful of fresh basil. The vendors called out cheerful greetings as she passed. Gina answered everyone with a warm smile and soft words. She was well known around Riverville for her kindness, always helping with local charity events, volunteering at shelters, and supporting neighbors in need. But few people here knew who her husband really was. Gina preferred it that way. She valued her quiet life, free from the shadows of flashing cameras and headlines. Only close friends and family knew she was married to Dwayne Johnson, the world-famous actor, former wrestling superstar, and beloved public figure. She paused at a stall piled high with tomatoes, gently turning one over in her fingers. It was plump and red, shining like a jewel under the sun. "I'll take a basket of these, please," she said, smiling at the elderly farmer behind the stand. Across the street, leaning against his patrol car, Officer Tom Grayson sipped his coffee, scanning the market lazily. He was in his late 20s, his uniform crisp and new. Just a few weeks before, he'd been promoted, and the authority felt heavy on his chest like a badge of honor. He was eager to show that he could handle himself, that he wasn't just another small-town cop. He spotted Gina walking toward a silver SUV parked at the curb, a brown paper bag of groceries in one arm and her purse slung over her shoulder. Tom narrowed his eyes. She moved with a confidence that somehow irritated him. To him, she was just another woman who might be trying to get away with something. Maybe she was too confident. Maybe she needed reminding who was really in charge in Riverville. He crushed his empty coffee cup, tossed it into a nearby trash can, adjusted his duty belt, and started toward her. "Hey," he barked sharply. Gina paused, halfway across the street, surprised by the harsh voice. She turned toward him. "Excuse me?" Tom planted himself squarely in her path. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice carried across the market, catching the attention of a few shoppers nearby. "I'm going to my car," Gina said, blinking in confusion. "Is there a problem?" "That your car?" Tom snapped, gesturing to the silver SUV. "You can't just walk up to any vehicle and pretend it's yours." "It is mine," Gina said, her voice polite but a little shaken. She shifted the grocery bag in her arms. "License and registration now." Tom's arms crossed over his chest, his posture rigid. "Is there a reason, officer?" Gina asked, trying to keep her voice calm. A few people were starting to glance their way, curiosity on their faces. "I'll ask the questions," Tom snapped. "You know how many car thefts we've had lately? You're acting suspicious." Gina opened her mouth, then closed it again, feeling a knot of unease twist in her stomach. She was acutely aware of every pair of eyes now watching. Her voice stayed soft. "I just finished shopping. I'm not doing anything wrong." Tom leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Raise your voice again, and you'll be in cuffs." "I'm not raising my voice," Gina said, her breath catching. Her hand trembled slightly on the grocery bag. But Tom wasn't listening. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp and cold. As she started to reach into her purse for her wallet, Tom suddenly grabbed her wrist roughly, squeezing tight. "Hey!" Gina cried out, pulling back instinctively. "Let go of me!" The paper bag slipped from her arm, spilling peaches and tomatoes across the pavement. Tom twisted her arm behind her back, pushing her roughly toward the SUV. The metallic thud of the car door slamming echoed through the market. "Hands on the car," he barked. "Now!" "I'm not resisting," Gina cried, tears starting to well in her eyes. "Please." Tom slammed her again into the SUV, hard enough that the side mirror cracked where her shoulder hit. A gasp rose from the growing crowd. Someone screamed. Dozens of phones came up, capturing video. "Do you think just because you're pretty and wearing a dress you own this town?" Tom hissed into her ear, breath hot and bitter. Tears streamed down Gina's face. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant. Please, let me go." But Tom shoved her even harder against the SUV, ignoring her words. The metal of the car door dug into her ribs, and a sharp pain made her cry out. He's pregnant, someone shouted. Get off her. Another voice screamed, call 911, he's assaulting her. People surged closer but kept their distance, unsure whether to intervene or not. Shoppers watched in horror. Children stared wide-eyed, clinging to their parents. Behind a stand stacked high with flowers, a tall figure froze as the familiar voice reached his ears. Dwayne Johnson had been quietly talking to a vendor, chatting about the best bunches of fresh basil for the week's meals. But now, his entire demeanor shifted. His body tensed, the easy grin wiped from his face, his dark eyes focused on the scene unfolding just yards away. Without a word, he started moving. Each step was deliberate, controlled, powerful. His presence seemed to ripple through the crowd like a shockwave. People instinctively stepped aside as he passed, drawn by the intensity on his face. Gina's cheek was pressed against the SUV window, tears dripping down the glass. Tom fumbled with his handcuffs, trying to wrench her wrists together. Hands behind your back, stop resisting, he barked. I'm not resisting, Gina sobbed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Then a deep voice rang out, calm yet carrying the weight of iron. Get your hands off her. Tom spun around, eyes flashing with irritation. His hand dropped to the baton at his belt, but he froze as his gaze traveled upward, recognizing the massive figure standing 10 feet away. The market seemed to hold its breath. There stood Dwayne Johnson. His eyes were like polished granite, his jaw clenched tight. His massive chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. The veins stood out in his arms as he held them slightly out to his sides, ready. Around them, silence stretched, broken only by the faint sound of tomatoes rolling across the asphalt. Tom swallowed, fury and confusion warring in his eyes. He barked out, "Who the hell do you think you are? She's detained." But Dwayne said nothing more. He just continued to close the distance, each step echoing in the stunned quiet of the farmer's market. The chapter ends with Dwayne reaching arm's length from Officer Tom Grayson, the tension electric in the summer air. The entire Riverville farmer's market seemed to freeze as Dwayne Johnson stepped forward, every line of his powerful frame coiled with quiet, controlled force. His eyes were locked on Officer Tom Grayson, who was still clutching his baton and glaring defiantly. Around them, shoppers stood motionless. Some had their phones up, still recording, while others simply stared, mouths agape. A baby began to cry somewhere in the crowd. The bright sun glinted off the silver SUV where Gina Johnson still lay pressed against the glass, her shoulders shaking as silent tears spilled down her cheeks. "Step back," Dwayne said, his voice calm but edged with steel. Tom squared his jaw. "She's detained. Back off or you'll be arrested for interfering with law enforcement." But Dwayne didn't even blink. He closed the distance in 2 steps, moving with the speed of a predator. Before Tom could fully react, Dwayne's massive hand shot out and seized Tom's wrist mid-reach. In one smooth practice motion, Dwayne twisted the officer's arm behind his back, forcing him to drop the baton with the loud clatter on the pavement. "Ah, hey! Hey!" Tom yelped, trying to wrench free. The crowd gasped, several voices overlapping in shock. "Oh my God, he's got him. Is that Dwayne Johnson?" Gina stumbled away from the SUV as a woman from the crowd hurried forward and caught her, steadying her gently. Gina's face was pale, eyes wide, and she clutched her bruised wrists protectively. "Are you okay?" the woman whispered urgently. "I'm pregnant," Gina managed through ragged breaths. He slammed me." Meanwhile, Dwayne maintained a firm but precise hold on Tom. The officer's knees buckled, and he dropped lower as Dwayne applied measured pressure. "I said let her go," Dwayne growled, his voice low as thunder. "You're assaulting an officer," Tom spat, red-faced, sweat gathering along his hairline. "When cops turn into bullies, that's not law, that's abuse," Dwayne said coldly, tightening the joint lock just enough to make Tom wince. Tom struggled, panting, his earlier arrogance fading fast. His eyes darted around, as if searching for someone to save him, but no one stepped forward. Instead, dozens of people were filming, some narrating breathlessly into their phones. "Holy crap, Dwayne Johnson just took down a cop. He's protecting his wife, she's pregnant. This is going viral." Finally, Tom crumpled to one knee, gasping. "Get your hands off me," he hissed. Dwayne leaned closer, his voice icy. "She's my wife, and you just laid your hands on a pregnant woman." From the edge of the crowd, another voice called out urgently, "What's going on here?" Officer James Hudson pushed through the crowd, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the sight of Dwayne Johnson holding his fellow officer in a submission hold. Hudson's hand hovered near his radio. "Stand down," Hudson said, raising both palms. "Everyone just stand down." Tom wheezed. "He attacked me." "Shut up," Hudson snapped at Tom, his face pale. Then he turned toward Dwayne. "Mr. Johnson, is your wife okay?" Dwayne's nostrils flared. "Get her a medic, now." Hudson swallowed hard, fumbling for his radio. "Dispatch, we have a pregnant female injured at the Riverville Market, possible assault by an officer. Requesting paramedics and internal affairs on scene immediately. Copy?" "Copy that," came the crackling reply. Tom's face twisted in rage and humiliation. "This isn't over." "It's over for you," Dwayne cut in, his voice soft but deadly. He released Tom, who slumped forward onto his hands. Dwayne stepped back, towering over him. The crowd began to murmur and shift as several people clapped and shouted encouragement. A woman near the front yelled, "This slammed a pregnant woman like a rag doll." A man added, voice shaking, "You're supposed to protect people, not hurt them." Tom struggled to rise, but Hudson stepped in, gripping his shoulder and shoving him back down. "Stay put," Hudson ordered. "Internal affairs is on their way." Meanwhile, paramedics arrived, pushing through the crowd with a stretcher and medical bags. "Ma'am, can you sit?" one of them asked gently, helping Gina lower herself onto the rear bumper of the ambulance. Gina winced as they examined her wrists, the skin already bruising purple. Dwayne hovered beside her, his massive frame blocking the sun, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Does this hurt?" the medic asked, gently pressing on her arm. Gina inhaled sharply. "A little." Dwayne reached down and smoothed a hand over her hair, his touch infinitely gentle despite the tension radiating through his body. "I've got you," he murmured. Nearby, Hudson spoke rapidly into his radio. "Yes, dispatch, confirming. It's Dwayne Johnson." "The Dwayne Johnson?" "The assaulted civilian is his wife, Gina Johnson. Officer Tom Grayson initiated the use of force. We need internal affairs here ASAP." People in the crowd were already typing furiously on their phones, uploading footage to social media. Within minutes, headlines began popping up online. "Cop slams pregnant woman, doesn't know her husband is Dwayne Johnson." Dwayne barely seemed aware of the commotion. His eyes were locked on Gina as the paramedics wrapped her wrist with a soft bandage. Every time she winced, his jaw flexed tighter. "Is the baby okay?" Dwayne asked quietly. The medic nodded. "Vitals look stable, but she should be checked at the hospital just to be safe." Then approached cautiously. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry. We'll handle this, I promise." Dwayne's voice was low and sharp. "Handle it, or I will." Hudson swallowed and nodded, stepping back. Across the market, another black SUV rolled up, government plates glinting in the sun. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, his gaze sweeping the crowd with practiced precision. He held up a badge as he approached Dwayne. "Agent Rick Rios, Internal Affairs," he said briskly. "Mr. Johnson, we saw the footage on the way over. It's already hitting social media before the official report even landed." Dwayne nodded once, but did not offer his hand. "Good," he said. "Now do your job." Rios turned, signaling to his agents. They moved across the lot to where Tom Grayson still knelt on the asphalt, now trembling as whispers of his identity swept through the crowd. "Officer Grayson," Rios said, his voice clipped, "you are under investigation for excessive force, civilian assault, and gross misconduct. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." Tom lifted his head, his face red, his voice shaking with fury. "You are making a mistake. That woman was resisting. She could have had a weapon." A voice from the crowd shouted over him, sharp and furious. "She was holding tomatoes, you idiot." Another voice echoed, "And you slammed her in front of kids." Rios didn't flinch. "Get him up," he ordered his agents. Two plainclothes officers hauled Tom roughly to his feet, ignoring his protests. He twisted in their grip, shouting, "Do you know who I am?" Rios' voice was ice. "Yeah, you're a disgrace with a badge." As Tom was dragged toward a waiting cruiser, scattered applause rippled through the market. Some people clapped, others cheered. A woman hurled an overripe peach at the departing officer, splattering his uniform. But Dwayne didn't move. His entire focus remained on Gina. He crouched beside her, wrapping a protective arm around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," he whispered. The paramedics began to prepare the gurney to lift her into the ambulance. Gina clung to Dwayne's hand, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "I just wanted to get tomatoes," she said softly, her voice catching. "I know," Dwayne murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "I know." The ambulance doors swung open. The medic gestured for Gina to lie back. She hesitated, looking at Dwayne. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. As the paramedics wheeled Gina toward the ambulance, Dwayne stood up slowly, his eyes following every movement. His entire body seemed wound tight, as if barely containing the storm within him. Over his shoulder, he saw Agent Rios giving orders to his team, cell phone already pressed to his ear. News vans were starting to roll up, cameras glinting in the sun. Dwayne clenched his jaw. He didn't care about headlines. He cared only about one thing, his wife, and that she, and their unborn child, would never be hurt again. And as the ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring softly, Dwayne turned toward the police cruisers and news cameras gathering at the market, his eyes cold and unflinching. This wasn't over. 3 days had passed since the chaos at the Riverville Farmers Market, yet the town still buzzed with the shockwaves of what had happened. Footage of Officer Tom Grayson slamming Gina Johnson against her own car had gone viral, replayed on news broadcasts and dissected frame by frame across social media. Headlines screamed variations of "Cop attacks pregnant woman stopped by her husband, Dwayne Johnson." Civil rights lawyers began offering the Johnson family free representation. Protesters appeared in the town square holding handmade signs reading "Pregnant, not a threat," and "Power should protect, not hurt." Yet, for Dwayne Johnson, none of that mattered as much as the bruises he still saw on Gina's wrists, or the way she sometimes jerked awake in the middle of the night, breathless and trembling. The media could rage all it wanted. His priority was his family. That morning, Dwayne sat at the kitchen table of their small ranch house on the edge of Riverville, staring into a coffee mug he hadn't touched. Sunlight filtered in through gauzy curtains, casting gentle light across the table. Across from him, Gina sat beside their young daughter, carefully braiding the little girl's hair. Despite her tired eyes, Gina wore a calm expression, focusing on each delicate twist of hair. Dwayne watched them in silence, his jaw tightening. He knew he'd done what he could that day at the market, but part of him still burned with quiet fury. Because this wasn't over. His phone buzzed on the table, jolting him from his thoughts. He picked it up. "Mr. Johnson," came the clipped voice of Agent Rick Rios. "Tom Grayson has requested a meeting. He's at the disciplinary hearing today, says he wants to apologize face to face." For a few moments, Dwayne said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. "I'll be there." The front steps of the Riverville Police Administrative Building were crowded. Reporters jostled for position, microphones raised high. A few quiet protesters held signs along the sidewalk. Dwayne arrived wearing simple jeans and a black t-shirt, moving up the steps with silent determination. Cameras flashed as he passed. Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere felt heavy, as if even the air itself held its breath. A long table stood at the center, flanked by chairs where senior officers sat waiting. Tom Grayson sat at the far end, his posture hunched, a shaved head making him look smaller and stripped of the swagger he'd worn days earlier. His badge and service weapon had already been surrendered. His eyes flicked upward nervously as Dwayne entered. But Wayne said nothing at first. He simply walked across the room, sat in the chair opposite Tom, folded his thick arms over his chest, and stared. Tom shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. I didn't know who she was." Dwayne's stare didn't waver. "That's your excuse?" "No, Tom faltered. "I didn't know she was pregnant. I thought maybe she was stealing the car. She looked suspicious." Dwayne leaned forward slightly, his voice as sharp as a blade. "You didn't ask. You didn't speak. You acted. You chose violence." Tom's lips trembled. "I messed up. I got carried away. I thought I was being tough." His voice cracked. "But when you showed up, say what you really mean," Dwayne interrupted, his voice still soft but cutting through the room. Tom let out a shaky breath, his shoulders sagged. "I thought I was the strongest guy in the street, then you showed me I wasn't." From the back of the room, Agent Rio stood quietly, arms folded, observing every word. Dwayne gave one slow nod. "It's not about being the strongest," he said. "It's about knowing when not to use your strength, something you clearly never learned." At that moment, the panel of senior officers entered the room, led by a gray-haired woman with keen eyes and a voice that carried authority. She called the hearing to order. Over the next hour, evidence was presented. Videos played on a large screen, each replay a fresh wound for Gina as she watched herself slammed into her car. Witness statements were read, the market vendor, the woman who helped Gina, even some of the bystanders who'd filmed everything. Eventually, the panel called for Gina's testimony via video link. She appeared on the screen, pale but composed, speaking into the camera from their home. Her voice trembled only slightly. "I don't want vengeance," she said, "but I want safety. For me, for my child, for every woman who walks across a parking lot anywhere." Dwayne listened, his chest aching as he watched his wife on the screen. He reached into his pocket and touched the bracelet their daughter had made for him last Christmas, a quiet reminder of why he was there. When the panel returned from deliberation, silence fell over the room thick enough to choke on. "Officer Thomas Grayson," the lead officer said firmly, "you are hereby stripped of your badge, terminated from your position, and banned from applying to any law enforcement agency in the state of Texas. Furthermore, criminal charges for aggravated assault and abuse of power will proceed in civilian court." Tom bowed his head. His union lawyer sat rigidly beside him, saying nothing. Dwayne rose from his chair slowly. He gave Tom a single piercing look, then turned and walked out of the hearing room without another word. Each step echoed quietly off the tile floor. Outside, sunlight flooded over him as he pushed through the building's glass doors. For the first time since that awful day, something inside him settled just a little. Justice wasn't finished, but they were one step closer. Late that afternoon, Dwayne pulled into their driveway, the small ranch house framed by the shade of towering oak trees. Through the front window, he could see Gina sitting on the couch, their daughter nestled against her side. The soft golden light of sunset bathed the room. He sat in the truck for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. Then he climbed out and went inside. Their daughter squealed, "Daddy," and threw herself into his arms. Dwayne scooped her up easily, kissing her cheek. "How did it go?" Gina asked gently as he set their daughter back on the floor. "It's over," Dwayne said. "They fired him. He's banned from law enforcement, and he's facing charges." Gina let out a shaky breath. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I didn't want revenge," she whispered. "I just wanted peace." Dwayne brushed a thumb gently across her face. "You got both." For the long moment, they simply sat close, heads leaning together, while their daughter quietly played at their feet. Outside, the world still roared with news coverage, protest, hashtags, but inside their home, there was finally quiet. Later that night, as Gina drifted off to sleep upstairs, Dwayne stood alone in the kitchen, fingers curled around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. His thoughts churned with memories of the market, of Tom's shaking voice at the hearing, of the look in Gina's eyes as she'd pleaded for safety, not just for herself, but for every woman who ever crossed a parking lot alone. He exhaled slowly, feeling a quiet resolve settle in his chest. This wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about the example he wanted to set, for his family and for anyone who needed to know that power didn't mean hurting people. True strength lay in protection, not domination. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. He set down the coffee and moved to answer it. Agent Rick Rio stood outside in plain clothes, looking tired but determined. "Sorry to show up unannounced," Rio said quietly, "but I wanted you to hear it from me. Grayson confessed this morning. No plea deal, full charges, and his confession opened a whole file cabinet. Women are coming forward about harassment, traffic stops gone wrong, internal complaints that were buried. It's bigger than your case now." Dwayne let out a slow breath. "Good." Rios nodded. "You're a hard man to cross, Mr. Johnson." Dwayne's mouth lifted in the faintest hint of a smile. "Only when someone touches what I love." Rios held out a hand. Dwayne shook it firmly, briefly, then closed the door as the agent left. He leaned back against it for a moment, listening to the hush of his home. Upstairs, Gina shifted in her sleep, murmuring faintly. Their daughter let out a soft giggle in her dreams. Dwayne pushed away from the door and climbed the stairs, his footsteps slow but steady. In the bedroom, he paused at Gina's side, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open sleepily. "Hey," she whispered, voice small and drowsy. "Hey," he whispered back, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Rest. We're okay now." Outside, the night wrapped around the house, the stars glittering like distant sentinels. Dwayne stood for a while at the window, arms folded, eyes sharp and watchful. Because for Dwayne Johnson, justice wasn't just a headline, it was a promise, a duty. And as long as he was here, no badge, no title, and no man would ever lay a hand on what he loved again.